Okay, so good evening, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us on this webinar this evening, where we'll be presenting our proposal for Copper Bottom Solar Farm. So my name is Chloe, and I'm the Community Liaison Manager and Project Developer here at Aura Power, and I'm joined by Chris, who is our UK Development Manager, and Rachel, who's our Planning Consultant from Dillis. So due to the ongoing pandemic, we've chosen to offer this online platform as well as presenting our plans in person, which we'll be doing at Barippa Methodist Church next week on the 1st of December. So both offer an opportunity to learn more about the proposal and ask any questions. We're also happy to have any separate discussions, so please don't hesitate to contact us. Before we go into the proposal itself, I just want to explain exactly how this webinar will work. So we'll take about 30 minutes presenting the plans, and then we'll open up the virtual floor for any questions that you might have for us to answer. So your microphones are muted for all of the session, but you should see a Q&A button on the left-hand side of your screen where you can type your question for us to then answer out loud. So we'll just answer questions once we've presented our plans, but please do feel free to type your question in at any time during the session. However, I would advise waiting till the end just in case your question is covered in our presentation. This webinar is also being recorded and will be available to watch again on our website. If you are watching the recorded version and have a question that has not been addressed, please do contact us. We'll also make the presentation slides available to download from our website. So the purpose of this webinar is to present our initial plans to understand local views, concerns and suggestions and incorporate the feedback into our final layout that we'll be submitting to Cornwall Council in the new year. We would therefore like to ask you to complete a short feedback form after the webinar, which will be sent round probably tomorrow. Okay, so who is Aura Power? So we're a renewable energy developer. We're based in Bristol and we were founded in 2013. We have around 30 staff in total and a dedicated UK team. We have numerous utility scale solar farms and battery storage sites in development, not only in the UK, but also in the Republic of Ireland, Portugal, Italy, Spain, Canada, and the US. We are a joint partner of IB Vote. They are a German engineering firm that's built over 1 gigawatt of solar farms worldwide and develops projects on a global scale. That equates to over 3 million solar panels with over 80 solar farms of varying sizes, of which more than half of those are situated in the UK. With the experience and financial backing of a global company like IB Voigt, we have the capability and financial security to see a project all the way through its development process to construction and then onto operation. As a responsible developer, our remit is to develop the solar farm design whilst engaging with the local community to help shape our plans, which we will then submit to Cornwall Council. If approved, IB Vote will construct and then operate the solar farm once it's built. Okay, so why solar? As we all know, we are in a climate and ecological emergency. And of course, it's important to recognise why solar can play such an important role in the future of the energy sector and our environment, and one that I think many people in Cornwall already are aware of. But in June 2019, the UK government became the first in the world to set a legally binding target for net zero emissions by 2050. And last month, the Prime Minister announced the target to completely decarbonise the electricity grid by 2035. The recent proceedings we've seen at COP26 was regarded as the most significant climate event since the 2015 Paris Agreement and highlighted the severity of limiting global temperatures and underlining the importance of governments globally taking urgent action to tackle climate change. As we transition to a net zero economy, electricity demand is forecast to increase threefold due to the move away from fossil fuel-based heating and transport. Solar power is proven to be the cheapest form of new electricity generation available, and government policy states we will need to build 3 gigawatts of new solar every year to achieve our decarbonisation targets. Indeed, we have already seen a substantial increase in wind and solar generation, with renewables outpacing fossil fuel generation for the first time last year. Furthermore, large-scale solar developments in the UK are no longer supported by subsidies, thus helping to reduce energy prices for everyone. The importance of this has been underlined by the recent gas price hike. It also allows us to become more self-sufficient as a country and less reliant from energy overseas. Cornwall Council was the first local authority to declare a climate emergency and set a commendable target to become carbon neutral by 2030. Solar farms like this can help meet this vital challenge. As well as generating clean, renewable energy, this solar farm will enrich local biodiversity, continue the use of agriculture via sheep grazing, and restore the soil to an even better condition than during its previous use under intensive farming, after the solar farm has been decommissioned. So this solar farm will have a capacity of 30 megawatts, which will generate enough electricity to power the equivalent of approximately 7,000 Cornwall homes or 10,600 electric cars, and save around 7,800 tonnes of CO2 from entering the atmosphere each year. Okay, so as you can see from the map here, our proposed site is located 2.5 kilometres from Camborne, between Carnell Green and Barippa. This part of the UK offers some of the best irradiance levels in the UK. This means more solar energy can be generated here than in most other areas of the UK. So the total site area that we've been looking at approximately covers 53 hectares of land, with a significant amount also used for biodiversity enhancements, which we'll talk about a bit later on. And 33 hectares of this area is proposed for the actual solar development, due to some areas being avoided due to potential archaeology. We've named the site Copper Bottom in reference to the site's historic copper mining activity. So the land is owned by 3 local landowners, all looking to diversify their land use, as farming in the UK is becoming increasingly challenging through more unpredictable weather and market conditions. Whilst some of the land is currently used for food production, it isn't classed as best and most versatile agricultural land and is mostly subgrade 3B. During the lifetime of the solar farm, the land can continue to be used for food production with sheep grazing, as some already is. And furthermore, as the fields will be left fallow, the soil will benefit from being rested and improve its natural long-term fertility. Finding a site for a solar farm can be very difficult, as there are many constraints that need to be sensibly considered and balanced. Indeed, locating sufficient capacity on the electricity network is one of the most difficult challenges, particularly in the southwest. As the electricity grid becomes increasingly saturated with renewable energy generation, securing a grid connection, as we have done here with Western Power, is becoming increasingly challenging. The land is relatively well hidden, assisted by existing vegetation and topography with limited nearby visual receptors. The site also benefits from having the potential to accommodate additional screening and mitigation measures, such as additional tree belts and hedgerows, which will also add to the biodiversity net gain. That being said, we have invited nearby residents with potential views to engage with us constructively to help shape our design. So, as well as the secured grid connection and the suitability of the land, we believe this site is also suitable for a number of other reasons. As I mentioned, the good levels of existing vegetation. It also has no landscape designations, no designated heritage assets in close proximity, and no ecological designations on or close in proximity. There's also opportunities to boost biodiversity. So I'm going to hand over to Chris, who will talk about what makes up a solar farm.
Thank you very much, Chloe, and good evening, everybody. I hope you're doing well. So what makes up a solar farm? As I'm sure you'll imagine, there are a number of different components. Probably the most important one is the photovoltaic panels. And these will be set out in rows with enough space in between and underneath them for sheep to graze. Solar technology is advancing rapidly, and we will be using south-facing fixed tilt bifacial panels, which allow higher efficiency in converting sunlight to solar energy. The panels will have a lower edge of a minimum of 0.7 meters high and a maximum height of 3 meters, though it is likely that this will be lower when it comes to construction. Between each row, there will be a minimum gap of 2.1 meters. This will enable the land to be grazed underneath throughout the lifetime of the project. So there'll also be fencing, and that will be for security purposes. At the moment, we envisage a 2-meter high deer fence around the perimeter with space for small mammals to pass through. Also on the site will be access tracks, some of which will be new, although we will use existing access tracks and hedgerow gaps where possible. New access tracks would have the appearance of a typical vernacular farm track with a crushed stone surface and will be 4 meters in width. The tracks would be allowed to grass over in time, thus allowing rainfall penetration and also reducing their visibility. Also across the proposed development will be inverters. These will be located underneath the panels and convert power from direct current to alternating current. Also present will be transformers, which are used to step the voltage up so it can be distributed into the grid network. This allows for a more efficient transfer of energy across the grid. Also present will be storage units. These contain spare parts and will be generally located in the vicinity of the substation, which leads me on to the next item, which will be the substation itself. This is where we connect into the grid network that feeds into the overhead line. The substation compound will contain a number of electrical infrastructure components and will be surrounded by a security fence. There'll also be another compound, this time a temporary construction compound. This will be a temporary area within the site for construction deliveries and site and welfare facilities. This will prevent vehicles from congesting on the road. All cables that connect the panels to the transformers and then onto the substation immediately to the west of the site will be underground. There is no security lighting when the solar farm will be operational. The only lighting that may be in place will be during construction. However, as construction will mainly take place during daylight hours and is likely to be in the summer, lighting requirements will be minimal. Next slide, please, Chloe. Thank you. So the panel arrays cover around half of the total site and will only disturb a very small proportion of the ground, typically less than 1% of the total footprint, as it is only the posts which are pile driven into the ground for panels to sit on top of. This allows plenty of space for sheep to graze safely beneath them. The grass can still grow under the panels on a UK solar farm, despite the misconception that the shade prevents it from doing so. And indeed, the panels can afford the sheep some protection from bad weather and shade in sunny weather. The substation at this site is located just off Penhill Road in the west of the proposed site. This is where we connect the electricity into the grid to supply clean energy to your homes. Its siting will largely be hidden from view behind existing trees and hedgerows. We'll be using monocrystalline silicon-based solar panels, which have up to 96% recycling efficiency. The operational period of the solar farm would be around 35 years. Once the end of the operational period is reached, the solar farm will be decommissioned and the land returned back to its former state. We believe it likely to be in a better state than it was before the solar farm was built, with more trees, hedges, and wildlife. There will also have been far fewer pesticides and fertilizers sprayed onto the land in this time. In addition to the solar panels and associated infrastructure, the proposal will include a number of ecological and landscape enhancements, such as new hedgerow planting, species-rich grassland, and wildflowers. We will retain all existing hedgerows in and around the site and allow hedgerows to grow to 3 meters high, as well as planting new trees for screening purposes. We are proposing to plant a 5-meter wide tree belt in a number of locations to further screen the solar farm from view from the nearest properties. The improved grassland beneath and around the panels allows us gains in biodiversity. Wildflowers will be sown in various parts of the site to further boost biodiversity and attract much needed pollinators to help tackle the ecological crisis. Buffers are included to protect existing on-site ecological and archaeological features. There are no affected footpaths by this development. It should also be noted that as solar farms are very quiet, we do not predict any adverse noise effect on homes nearby. We welcome any suggestions from members of the public or local conservation groups on how we can maximize our biodiversity efforts and encourage local people to get involved in the monitoring of biodiversity, particularly much needed bee populations. So next slide, please, Chloe. Thank you. So these next few slides show the site from a few nearby viewpoints. we have agreed 13 viewpoints in total with the Council's landscape officer in reference to the zone of theoretical visibility, which you can currently see on your screen. For the purpose of this consultation event, we will be showing the most impactful viewpoints where the largest number of markers can be seen, but the full suite of photographs will be submitted with our planning application. This model shows the theoretical visibility only and does not account for existing or proposed vegetation or buildings, and so can be considered a worst-case scenario. The light pink indicates the most visibility, and the purple being only slight visibility. The white areas indicate where it is not visible at all. As this webinar is intended to gain feedback on our initial proposal, we have not yet finalized the design, so please note that the next images you see are worst case. We have also included interpretations of the projected views after 10 years, once the trees and hedges have grown. There will be more visualizations available to view once we have submitted our application, but these are to give an initial impression of the scheme. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, which shows a viewpoint taken from the corner of Springfield Park on the road at the junction with African Row, looking towards the proposed site, around about 195 meters from the nearest panel. The top image shows the existing view, the middle shows the view after the solar farm has been built, and the third view shows the view once the new trees have grown and completely hidden the solar farm from view. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So this viewpoint image is taken from the bridleway near Trinoweth, 549 meters from the nearest panel. This viewpoint is an elevated one where the solar farm is one of the most exposed. You can see the shading of the solar farm in the middle of the screen ahead of the existing woodland. The bottom view shows the same view projected after 10 years once the proposed on-site tree planting has grown and reduced the amount of panels in view from this viewpoint. It should be noted that these 10-year interpretations are designed only to show the solar farm and the growth of the tree planting we are proposing, not the growth of existing vegetation beyond our site boundary. So next slide, please, for another viewpoint. Thank you. So this viewpoint is taken slightly further east from the previous viewpoint on the bridleway towards Halgarrick Farm. Again, this is another elevated viewpoint, so you can see the solar farm in the distance on the right hand of your screen. And I'll now hand over to Rachel, who is our planning consultant that will be taking the next few slides.
Thanks, Chris. So the first slide I've got is on construction and access. Obviously, we need to get all the components to the solar farm. The construction of the solar farm will take place over a 4 to 6 month period, likely during the spring and summer months. If consented, we likely wouldn't start construction until 2023, but would notify the local community well in advance. The plan you can see on the screen shows the indicative route to site, which would be off the A30, down Roseworthy Hill, turning left onto Gwynere Road, and then through Carnell Green onto Penhale Road. We'd have 2 access points off this road to within the site, and we'd be using existing site entrances, so we didn't have to make new gaps in any hedgerows. HGV movements will only happen outside peak times, and a contact number will be made available for any residents who have any concerns over this period. Residents along the route in the vicinity of the solar farm will also be notified in advance of construction. Where possible, we will use the existing field access tracks to reach the panels further within the solar farm, and compacted gravel will be used where existing access tracks are not adequate for HGVs. A traffic management plan will be implemented before construction and agreed with the Council's Highway Authority. Most of the construction traffic will arrive on site in the first few weeks of construction, after which the number of HGVs will reduce significantly. As the solar farm requires little maintenance after the construction, there will be minimal traffic going onto the site. So the next slide's on biodiversity. A recent study has shown the UK has lost nearly half of its biodiversity since the Industrial Revolution. That's more biodiversity loss than any G7 country and is in the worst 10% globally. We've also lost a staggering 97% of wildflower meadows since the 1930s. Political leaders are starting to take action and have committed to reversing biodiversity loss by 2030. Just this week, the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Local Nature Partnership declared an ecological emergency. The Cornwall Wildlife Trust 2020 Cornwall State of Nature report found that 12% of species are threatened with local extinction or complete loss in Cornwall, and nearly half of terrestrial mammals and 3/5 of butterflies are found in fewer places over the last 30 years. There is an abundance of evidence showing that the maintenance practices of solar farms can significantly improve biodiversity by improving habitats and food for wildlife. This is not only due to there being less intervention on the land compared with when the land was being farmed with the use of pesticides and fertilizers, but also due to measures developers like Aura are putting in place to promote biodiversity. As the panels sit on piles, there is minimal disturbance to the ground, which allows the grass to continue to grow and the ability for sheep to graze beneath them. Arable fields can be converted to species-rich pasture and so acting as a stable store of carbon, a dual benefit to combat climate change and boost biodiversity. As the fields are left fallow for the life of the solar farm, the soil will be kept healthy, boost carbon sequestration, and after the solar farm has reached the end of its life, it can be removed with up to 96% of it recyclable. The land can then be returned to its previous state or even better than before. We will build the panels and infrastructure around existing hedgerows and trees. Vegetation removal will be minimal and only if needed for access. The fence will allow for small mammals to cross the site using gaps underneath the fence. The arable land within the development will be converted to grassland with wildflowers sown, allowing substantial gains in biodiversity. We are proposing to plant numerous tree belts across the site, which, as well as enhancing hedgerows, will allow them to grow taller so they will screen the site. This will greatly benefit local wildlife, and a biodiversity net gain calculation will be submitted with our application once we have finalised the layout and mitigation proposals. A recent study by the Solar Trade Association discovered that some solar farms had up to 6 times more pollinators than adjacent fields without solar panels on. We will be producing a landscape and ecological management plan. This will ensure the biodiversity net gains are maximised throughout the lifetime of the solar farm. This plan will specify things such as where and how existing vegetation will be enhanced, the density of new meadow hedges and trees, the species mix for various habitats, how habitats will be protected during construction, and how habitats will be maintained through the project. The plan will be agreed with Cornwall Council and will outline the management regime of the solar farm. Progression of the habitats will be monitored annually and reports will be submitted to the Council. The LEMP will be regularly reviewed and adapted if necessary to ensure biodiversity aims are met. We will also welcome local conservation charities who may be interested in our site, and if they could get in touch, we can speak to them about the monitoring of wildlife populations. Now we've got a few slides which are about the findings of the surveys that we've undertaken so far. We undertook a screening exercise with Cornwall Council, who have determined that the site requires an environmental impact assessment. This will be submitted with our planning application, and we have already undertaken extensive environmental surveys to inform our design. This includes ecology, an extended phase 1 habitat survey, which looks at not just the habitat but any protected species on the site, such as badgers or great crested newts. And where there are ecological features, we can build in buffers to protect the habitats. Some surveys are still ongoing, and the results of all the assessments will be presented in the environmental statement. We've also undertaken a landscape assessment, which has informed the height of the panels, which, as Chris said earlier, is limited to 3 metres to minimise visual impact. We've also agreed viewpoints with the local authority, the 13 viewpoints which were shown on the plan you saw earlier, and the full assessment will look at the impact on landscape character and the visual impact for residents, road and rail users, and users of public rights of way. Although we don't expect noise to be an issue, we'll also be undertaking the noise assessment, which will be submitted as part of the application. Generally, solar farms are very quiet and obviously are only operational during the daytime, so there isn't any issues with noise in the evening or at night. Also undertaking a flood risk assessment. The site itself is predominantly in flood zone 1, meaning there's a very low risk of flooding from rivers or sea. As you'll know, there is a small river that runs along the side of the site, so we take this into account and don't put any infrastructure in the areas of land closest to the river, which are more liable to be flooded. Solar farms do not contribute to flooding, as the arrays are designed with gaps to allow the surface water to be evenly dispersed and absorbed by a healthy grass sward underneath. We're also undertaking a heritage and archaeological assessment, and we've had a desk-based assessment undertaken already, so we can avoid any areas where there's likely to be heritage assets. We've also undertaken a geophysics assessment, which has uncovered some areas of archaeological significance, and we'll be continuing to assess the site as we proceed with changes to the layout. And finally, we've got a glint and glare assessment. Solar panels are designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They are considered safe to install close to airports and near major roads. The reflection from a solar farm is much less than commercial greenhouses, polytunnels, and even grass. From a distance, they appear in the landscape similar to a ploughed field or a small lake. An assessment of potential impacts upon road, rail, residential, and aviation receptors will be undertaken upon the final site design. Any potential impacts will be mitigated either through panel removal or hedge or tree planting.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks, Chris. So I'm going to talk about local benefits. So as well as the enriched biodiversity, which Rachel was discussing, there are a number of local benefits which this solar farm could bring. So the solar farm will contribute over £80,000 in business rates to Cornwall Council every year. Jobs will be created during construction of the project and within the supply chain. There will also be ancillary benefits arising from contractors from outside the area staying locally and using local services. We would also like to hear from any local suppliers who would be considered in our tendering process. This would be in terms of landscaping, any local traffic management, and local security services. So in addition to this, we are proposing a community benefit fund of £350 per megawatt. That's index linked per year for the lifetime of the solar farm. This is encouraged to be spent locally on social and environmental projects. Typical projects that we've seen have been funded by other solar farms across the UK include energy efficiency measures on public buildings, play equipment for children, and some even fibre optic broadband. So for the 30 megawatts of capacity that we're proposing here, this totals £10,500 a year, and that will be for 35 years or over £360,000 in total. So the administration of these funds will be managed locally, and we note that Gwynedd Gwyddion already hosts a community benefit fund with other renewable energy contributors, and we of course welcome further discussions with the parish council and trust members and local residents on this topic. We also want to help infuse the younger generation and educate them on the importance of renewable energy. As such, we would like to encourage school visits to the proposed solar farm and educational sessions to local schools about the importance of renewable energy. We use an existing experienced specialist who tailor their sessions to the national curriculum. If you are or you know of a teacher from a local school who's interested in participating, then we would certainly love to hear from you. Okay, so time scales. So consulting with the local community is very important to us and also a crucial part of getting our design right to submit a planning application. Following this consultation, we'll look to incorporate the views of local community and interested parties into our proposal and revise our designs if necessary and feasible. We'll then look to finalise our proposed design and aim to submit a planning application in the next few months in the new year. Cornwall Council has already provided pre-application advice and will continue to work with the planning officer and specialist consultees once submitted to address any comments raised. After the application is submitted, the council will undertake their own consultation process and invite local residents to comment on the application. Our aim is to submit a proposal which not only complies fully with the local plan and national planning policy framework, but one which the local community can support. The planning determination period for developments of this scale can take anything from 13 weeks to 32 weeks, but we'd hope to have a decision towards the spring, summer of next year. If approved, we'd look to start construction probably at the earliest spring, summer of 2023. If you would like to speak to us in person, we will be holding an in-person exhibition at Barippa Methodist Church next week on the 1st of December between 4 and 7 p.m. We will be hosting a session exclusively for parish and town councillors between 3 and 4. If this isn't convenient and you'd still like to speak to us separately or in person, then please do not hesitate to get in touch. So that's the end of our presentation, and thank you very much for listening. We'll now answer any questions that you might have. So if you haven't already done so, then please do type your question using that Q&A button, which should be on the left-hand side of your screen. So I'll just go through those and read them out, and either myself, Chris, or Rachel will answer. Okay, so we've got one question here. I'm just going to read it out. So you have covered all my questions on environmental and aesthetic impacts concerns. That's excellent. I like what I'm hearing. Fantastic. Just one further question. The local income generation that the project creates, is this fed back into the local authorities' big pot or actually given to the local town councils, village associations to use as they see fit? Yeah, so the community benefit fund that we are offering will be specifically for the local parish council. So that will go into the immediate community. We already know that Gwynedd Gwyddion have a community fund set up for that purpose from the other two solar farms which are in the parish. So we'd hope to be able to contribute towards that too, and those funds would be distributed via that method. But we'd welcome any other suggestions, and we'll be having chats with the parish council as well. Okay, thanks very much. So another question that we've got here, why have you chosen a site between two villages? That's a very good question. Chris, I'll let you take that one on site selection.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. So really, when choosing a location to develop a solar farm, there are a number of considerations which we elaborated on in the presentation. But chiefly among those considerations is where there is available grid capacity. And as there is a 132,000 volt power line that crosses the site, which had capacity and which we have secured with Western Power, that was one of the considerations that it weighs heavily in consideration of this location. It's probably also worth mentioning, as I'm sure we all know, that the UK is a densely populated country, and it's very difficult to find a site that doesn't have a location that is nearby to some receptors. We believe that this is a good site because it has the potential to be well screened, and indeed has a number of pretty good hedgerows and tree belts already across the site. So we'd hope that we'd effectively be able to screen it in due course.
Thanks, Chris. We just have another question here. The viewpoint map is impossible to read in that scale. Can you supply a better one, please? Yeah, of course we will. And we realise that this, depending on what size screen you're looking at, it may not be that easy to view. Number one, we'll make these available on our website so you can download them yourself. Number two, please get in touch if you want me to send you anything in the post. I'd be happy to do that so you can have a look at it physically. And number three, we will be uploading all of these documents as well once we've submitted, because they might change slightly depending on how the feedback goes on and our final design. So I hope that answers your question. I think that was the end of the questions. I'll just leave it a couple of minutes. If anybody has any others, please feel free to pop in to the Q&A box now.
Worth also mentioning perhaps that we'll be in town, so to speak, next week. So do pop along and have a chat with us in person then. It's a great opportunity to meet us and it's for us to help explain the proposal perhaps slightly better in person. So yeah, do come along to that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. And the slides that we've shown, they'll be in a different format. They'll be on AO exhibition boards, so you'll be able to come and have a look at them, and they'll be obviously enlarged as well. Cool, I think that's it. Just got a comment there. Thanks for taking the time to discuss and consult with us. You're very welcome. We're continuing to engage with people, so please continue to engage with us, and we will keep you updated. Okay, so I think we'll finish it there. Like I said, we will be sending around a feedback form. You'll probably receive that in your inbox tomorrow, but it will be available on our website as well. And we'll be in Barippa next week, so we hope to see people there as well. And if you are watching the recorded version of this, then please, you can find the feedback form questionnaire. It'll be uploaded to our webpage. Just to note that your personal details will not be passed on to any third parties and will only be used for the purpose of this public consultation. Okay, so thanks everybody, and have a lovely evening.